Are things falling apart or coming together? So I'm talking to Black women. It could be about a job, it could be about a relationship, it could be about a family situation. This is for all Black women. If you're in a situation you feel like your life is falling apart in some way, it can feel overwhelming and devastating and all those things. Yet it may be actually coming together. So we're going to talk a little bit in terms of what does that mean? What am I talking about? So you'll know more about that when we finish this conversation. So if you don't know me already, I'm Dr. Kammani. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, a toxic job survivor, but more importantly, I'm a toxic job liberator for Black women. I'm also the co-host with Mercer Price of the Job Liberation Virtual Summit, which helps Black women learn ways and plan for exiting a job, with learning how to replace your income, learning about what to do about your health insurance, your retirement, and so much more. So we recently ushered over 300 Black women to freedom. You are able to access the replay by going in the description section. So I'm excited to have Tisha here today, and we're going to get really into it today. So ladies, get ready. So Tisha, if you can introduce yourself, and we'll get right into the conversation.
Hello, my beautiful queens. My name is Tisha Mitchell, your midlife and makeover maven. And when I tell you that this midlife has been a complete makeover, I can't wait to get into it.
Yes, thank you, Tisha. So recently, I think it was when we were both in Stephanie Perry's YouTube Success Society, and you made a comment that I was like, whoa. And I texted you right after, like, can you be a guest? Because you talked about a lot of very serious life events happening in your life, like major. And it was like one thing after the rest, and it sounded really heavy. But you said, you know what? But my life is coming together. It's not falling apart. It's coming together. Can you share with the audience, what did you mean by that? What were the things that you were going through? And how was it that these major life events that most people would think, oh my gosh, you said it was actually my life coming back together, coming together?
Well, let me start off by saying my motto for this year is 53 and finally free. I
Oh, I
turned,
like
I
that.
turned 53 last month. And when I tell you, I never thought that I would be as free as I am now. But to let you tell the story, excuse me, it was something. So I found myself in 2020 um, in a tumultuous marriage in the middle, excuse me, in the middle of COVID,
Mm-hmm.
in a very chaotic household, smack dab in the middle of menopause, and in all of that, living in a house with a man who had clearly left the relationship emotionally, but was still there physically. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it was a lot to take in at that
Mm-hmm.
time. And when I tell you, there were days that I was not sure that I was going to make it out. In fact, I say I cried every single day for an entire year during that process.
Ooh. Oh my gosh. Wow. It's like basically you were all cried out like Mary J. Blige. You were just, wow. That's
It,
a lot.
it was a lot. It was a lot. And, those are all of those individually are major life events, right? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
did I say I was turning 50 in there? And that is like major significant for my family. And I'll get into that with you in a little bit. But
Mm-hmm.
it was like there was really no space for me to turn, right? I've always been looked at as the strong one.
Mm-hmm.
But as my marriage was falling apart,
Mm-hmm.
it was just a reflection of everything in my life that had fallen apart that I had kind of duct taped together. And
Mm.
as Black women, has we just kind of push things to the side because we
Keep
push
on
through.
moving. Yep.
So it wasn't until that point that I grieved all of those years, nearly 50 years worth of trauma. And
Wow.
it kind of all hit around the same time. And it was a very, very dark period of time.
You're right. So when one thing falls apart, it seems like you start reflecting on other things in your life that are falling apart. And as Black women, we have always been told we are so strong. We got to keep moving. You can't let people see you cry. We can't. But then all of that we're holding in. But you talked about you went like through this grieving process of all that had happened to you.
You can't imagine, Dr. Kammani, I really was living the dream. I had
Mm,
everything I wanted. I had a beautiful home, nice cars, two master's degrees, a husband who was the primary breadwinner, education, had a career going, traveling the world. It was an amazing time, but it
Mm.
was beauty over chaos. Under
Mm.
the surface, there was always something swirling around that I never could really catch my footing.
Mm.
And that was familiar to me, right?
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
chaos was familiar. What I
Mhm.
couldn't figure out is why it is I couldn't achieve my way out of it.
Hmm. So even on the surface, most people looking in would say, "Oh, you have the perfect life," but as you were in that situation, it on face value looks good, but when you were in it, you were not feeling contentment, you were not feeling fulfillment, you weren't feeling those things.
Oh my goodness, I was married to a man who was not married to me.
Break that down, please.
Well, so let me start by saying I am a recovering codependent and people pleaser,
Mhm.
right? And so, I grew up with some not very healthy habits with regard to relationships, with regard to how men and women get along, how families get along. Like what I could see is what I didn't want to be like. What
Mm.
I hadn't seen was how to create what I do want to be like.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that my ex-husband and I were both products of childhood trauma.
Mm.
And it was like the Clash of the Titans. So, in all fairness to him, I met him at a space where he really was the highest functioning man I'd ever known. He had,
Mm.
and this is like crazy, right? So I'm like, oh my goodness, he's got a job, he's got a good job, he's got benefits, he's got good credit, he's got all his teeth, he does not have any baby mamas, like
Okay.
he owns a home, like so
Check, check, check.
all of the checks on the outside, right?
Yeah.
But what I didn't know was how emotionally disconnected we would be, and how
Mm.
how reminiscent that was of my childhood and
Mm.
abandoned. Like, so while he was physically present, emotionally he abandoned me over and over. And so it was a trigger, and I never felt safe. So no matter what it looked like on the outside, I never was okay with feeling safe. That's number
Yeah.
one. But
Yeah.
number two was I got married late in life.
Mm.
So I'm a teen mom,
Mhm.
and we'll get into that in a little bit because all of this ties in.
Mhm.
But by the time I met my ex, I had already raised my son on my own,
Mm.
had my college degree, owned my own home, was in my career. But for
Mhm.
whatever reason, he never saw that part of me. He only saw I'm the man and you're the woman. And, you know, I, for me, when I got married, I just wanted an intact family, right? As
Uh,
I said, he was the highest functioning man I knew. So it's almost like with anything, right?
mhm.
When you're broke, you think that money will solve every problem
Mhm.
until you get money and you realize
Mhm.
there's some problems that money can't solve.
Right.
And it takes you to get to that point saying, oh no, this was never a financial issue. This is a core value and character issue. And those
Right.
you get to work on when you got a little bit of extra time and self-awareness.
Mhm.
So I think when we got to that space, we realized that there was a lot more work that we still needed to do.
Mm.
And I think that we didn't know how to do it. I think that
Mm.
it just got to be a lot. And of course, I was married to a soldier who had been to war 3 times.
Wow.
So, I remember talking to a therapist one time, and she said, I need you to remember that you have trauma too.
Mhm.
And what she meant was you can't spend your life worrying about what's going on with him. And
Mhm.
so, remember, I told you I am a recovering codependent.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, and this is my own personal opinion, this is not
Mhm.
anything official. I
Mhm.
believe that being married to a soldier, especially during wartime, when the military preaches to you it's all about the soldier, it's all about the mission. And
Mhm.
that is correct. But
Mhm.
if you are a person who's already used to putting yourself second,
Mm.
and you marry into a situation that says what we do is more important than everything else. And
Mhm.
it's true, right?
Mhm.
They had a
Mhm.
very, very important mission. What happens though is that you start over time believing that your needs and your wants and your desires don't matter
Yeah.
because someone else has that higher need, and it's drilled into you and drilled into you and drilled into you.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, you start, for me, I can't speak for
Mhm.
everybody else,
Mhm.
I started shrinking
Mm.
shrinking and shrinking to the mission. And it got to a point where I no longer had my own voice
Wow. You lost yourself.
completely.
Yeah. It sounds like in so many ways that, and I think this happens a lot with people in relationships, is that they're seeking a partner. They probably don't know it. It's probably unconsciously. They're seeking a partner that will help heal some childhood wound. And so you sought a partner, but it recreated the same childhood trauma, codependency that you were experiencing as a child, where you didn't really feel like you had a voice. And now you're an adult, even though you had been raised a child, done all this, but now you've gone back into this childhood role in your marriage.
Absolutely. But
Mm.
here's the beautiful part about it.
Hmm.
It had to happen. And it had to happen for me to be able to say, when I was a child and when I was younger, I didn't have the tools, the language, or the support to be able to process that
Hmm.
through.
And you didn't know that there was something that you deserved better as a child.
I couldn't even put language to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
First of all, I didn't even know it was unusual. At that point in
Hmm.
your life, you really have not met a lot of close outside relationships where you
Hmm.
start to see patterns, right?
Right.
So when you're young and you're growing up, you think this is something that's just exclusive to you. And I didn't have any siblings. I
Mm-hmm.
had step siblings, but there was nobody in the house that I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not even anybody there to share that experience with you. And so for me, there was a whole bunch of cognitive dissonance in my upbringing to be able to cope and survive.
Mm-hmm.
So I was used to that. And
Mm-hmm.
so going into a chaotic situation was very familiar. Although at a certain point, I realized we ain't got to live like this. And I don't want to anymore. But
But
just
can you share with us that part? Like, how long were you in the marriage before you said, "I don't have to live like this"? And what were the kind of things that were happening that
oh,
helped you realize that?
Oh, it as there was this situation that happened. I remember it was around like late August, first part of September. I remember because he had taken a trip with his family.
Hmm.
And I remember in COVID, I was like, listen, let's just go figure this out, right? You got your issues, I've got my issues, but we have this amazing life. Think about this. You're healthy, I'm healthy, we have money, we have benefits, we don't have children that we're taking care of, we don't have parents that we're responsible for. It's just us. And we
Hmm.
can create the most beautiful thing. Our foundation started off like real bad, but we
Hmm.
have the opportunity now to fix it, to really dig in and do the work to break the trauma.
Hmm.
And he said, I ain't got time for that right now.
What?
Now, mind you, this man's retired. He ain't got no job. He's bringing in six figures just at the house. What else do you have to do?
And just the message of that. Even if he was super busy, the priority is not the marriage and really saving the marriage and really recommitting to the marriage. It was, I just don't have time for like almost dismissed.
But I didn't realize until that moment that that's how the relationship was the entire time. We
Mm.
packaged it as the military and the military work comes first, when in
Mm.
actuality, that's who you truly are.
Mm.
Military allowed it to go unnoticed for a lot longer.
Okay. Okay.
Right. And I say this, the military actually allowed my ex to live a double life
In what way?
because he could go off and, he's very high ranking. So he could go
Mhm.
off and, be the boss and
Hmm.
live like a bachelor.
Hmm.
And culturally, I'm not saying that was not unacceptable in that
Mhm.
environment.
Mhm.
But we
Mhm.
come back and then we're back in this new life. And so it
Mhm.
never felt safe to know that this is the space you want to be, because at any moment you'll volunteer to go over again. And I know I didn't at that point, right? I trusted him then, but it wasn't until I was kind of looking back that things all aligned.
What were the things that aligned?
He wasn't very communicative.
Mhm.
One, well, let's back up. The red flags were always there. I was his
Mhm.
third wife.
Oh.
And in each situation, there was infidelity.
Oh.
you would think that that would be a red flag for me. Oh
Mm.
no, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to help him and I'm going to save him and he's going to be different.
What made you think, oh, because he had all the shiny objects?
We had the things.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm like, he picked me, right? No, I picked him.
Ah, okay. Okay. And so you overlooked some things that were huge red flags.
No, I
And then
didn't
the
overlook
later,
them. No, ma'am, I didn't overlook them. I ignored them.
oh, you ignored them. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And so then over time, things became revealed.
Yeah. Like, there's I've always kind of had this thought where, something will come up and I can't really put it with anything. So I'll just kind of pack it in my brain till later. And
Mhm.
then it eventually will come up, right?
Mhm.
There was nothing in my ex's background that would indicate that he would be a good partner. There was also nothing in my background that would indicate that I would choose a good partner. So as
Ooh.
much as I would like to blame him, I have to take responsibility for my part.
Wow. Okay, let's pause there because first, what makes you say that? So in terms of like your upbringing, what makes you say that? Because women watching this may have similarities with you, but I think the message is that it's not that you've had the experience, it's that maybe you were unhealed or didn't go through a healing process. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Okay. So I grew up where relationship equaled abuse. There was some
Mhm.
sort of abuse in every adult relationship that I grew up with, whether
Mhm.
it was physical violence, whether it was financial abuse, whether it
Mhm.
was emotional abuse, whether
Mhm.
it was, verbal disregard. There was every sort of dysfunction that you could
Mhm.
see, I saw modeled.
Mhm.
And and I want to say this respectfully, right?
Mhm.
I know this comes from a place of trauma from my family. There were
Mhm.
oftentimes in my household I felt like I was like a fly on the wall observing a space that I just really didn't belong in, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
That I was always the one that was like curious, like, this doesn't really make any sense.
Right.
So, in all fairness, though, my mom was a nurse. And so I lived a middle class life,
Mhm.
although that's not how she grew up. And
Mhm.
so we kind of had a different outlook as far as what life looks like.
Mhm.
It's because I was in an environment where I could see differently.
Mhm.
And I really do appreciate her for that.
Mhm.
Um, but so because I'd not seen a positive situation modeled, right? So when I say he was high functioning, I didn't grow up with men who had jobs. I didn't,
Mm.
I grew up with men who were on drugs or had baby
Mhm.
mamas or,
Mhm.
blended families, or maybe
Mhm.
they would work, maybe they would not. Uh,
Mhm.
just and we had to pretend that we didn't see what we saw.
Wow.
And that's how I survived, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
survive by, acting like you don't see. But, I came across to my family as a very angry person. And I
Mm.
think that it was not that I was angry as much as I was traumatized
Mhm.
and living in a generationally codependent family. And so
Yeah.
there were things that I was seeing that I couldn't put language to, that
Mhm.
didn't really feel right, but I didn't have another space to
Mhm.
kind of handle it. So I kept
Mhm.
running away.
Mm.
I kept moving
Mhm.
further and further away until finally I got to Atlanta, which was, 12 hours away by car, right?
Mm.
But here's what I realized when I got here. I added physical distance, but I still was emotionally enmeshed. And it took some
Right.
years to get out of that.
Mm. Okay.
But
So
there
you said,
were these steps along the way that I kept trying to break free and break free
uh-huh.
and break
Uh-huh.
free.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. So just a few things, because you said a whole bunch there. So one is you said that you were grateful to your mom because she provided certain things so that you didn't grow up in the way that she did in terms of like physical things. But emotionally, there was that generational transmission of trauma happening. but physically she provided all these things just like your ex-husband did.
Absolutely.
And so you were like kind of observing things and you were aware that something's not quite right. And so there was that cognitive dissonance, like, wait a minute, like what's happening here? So you did feel a level of anger and rage about what's happening too, because it wasn't fair, wasn't right, but you didn't have the language for it. So your coping response was, I'm going to run away from this. But
Absolutely.
the physical distance didn't replace the emotional, like you said, the emotional entanglement that you still had with your family. And so you were kind of still an unhealed, harmed little girl in many ways when you met your husband, your ex-husband.
Absolutely. So a couple things happened. The first is I remember being in therapy and my therapist said, do you realize that your husband and your mother show up as the same person in your life?
That's profound.
It is. And another thing she said to me, and this was years before I got divorced, she said, do you want a divorce? And I was like, I think you're asking me the wrong question. She's like, what? What do you mean? I said, probably a better question is, am I willing to do the work that's required for me to get a divorce? Now, at that time, I did not know how much work it was going to be. But what I will tell you is it took me 4 years to get a divorce.
Wow.
There were 14 attorneys involved in our case.
What? Okay. Wow. Okay. I've never heard of something like that. So first of all, what was the work that you needed? And how were you insightful enough to even know it's not the divorce per se, but I need to get myself ready to go through this process? How did you?
So, first of all, at that time, I was in graduate school. So I was getting my master's degree in real estate, right? And that really was taking all of my energy. One of the things that I became very good at after having been a teen mom was compartmentalizing. And so I left my mother's house at 18 with a 3-year-old in Michigan in the dead of winter with no car, right?
Wow.
So I still was 18. I still didn't have a car. I still was a mom. I still was a college student. In order for me to survive all of that, I had to put things in their bucket, right? So the same happened with grad school. So grad school at that time was the most important bucket. So everything else got pushed to the side to the point. So, and this is so crazy, but about 6 weeks before that graduate program was a 1-year program, 11 months. So it was very intense, right? And I was almost at the end, and about 4 weeks before I graduated from that program, which was December, my dog I had for 15 years died.
Oh, wow.
And it was so devastating, but I had to push all of that to the side because I was 4 weeks from this degree, right? And so it was just one of those things I just kind of put into my mind that you got to be careful about that because you've had to put some things in a box to survive. But it's time to unpack that stuff.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I knew, like there was something inside of me, and I think it's always been inside of me that I've known that the work was going to have to come from me. And it's really been difficult, I would have to say, because I have been, I was very protective of my son so that I could shield him from a lot of the things that I grew up with, right? But then I was kind of sandwiched between, but I'm the buffer between, what happened back there too, right? So while I'm protecting him on one end, I'm still perpetuating things on the other.
Oh, wow.
I know that there's a disconnect there, but I don't know how to reconcile it earlier.
Right. But the main point is the awareness is so important. So you weren't continuing on you were trying to disrupt that generational transmission of trauma. You were trying, but then there was so much that you were absorbing with the trauma and you didn't ever had a time to heal from it because you're always taking care of things. You got a son, you're in graduate school, you're doing all these different things. So it took you 4 years to really go through that process of what kind of things did you work on to kind of help you get ready?
So what I will first say is that one of the greatest gifts I believe that God has provided is COVID, where we became more involved with each other via video, and we started, more of us were telling our stories. And so there were things that I just kind of felt, but I didn't know how to process. The first book that I read, I remember as I was leaving, was a book by Lisa Turkhurst called "Forgiving What You Can't Forget." And so I was really trying to kind of make sense of what I was going through.
Mhm.
And so I really kind of dove into women who've gone through some things and how is it on the other side, right?
Mhm.
I didn't feel like I was emotionally strong enough at that moment to be able to get to the other side, but I knew that if other people did it, I could too, even if I didn't know how.
Hmm. So seeing examples of models is so important.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I really kind of for a very long time, and this is really kind of how I disconnected from my family, is that
Mhm.
as I was going through this with my ex, I
Mhm.
wasn't grieving just the loss of my marriage,
Mhm.
but I'd also had a miscarriage that I hadn't
Oh,
grieved.
wow.
And I also hadn't grieved my childhood, right? There was
Mhm.
and then I'm turning
And your dog.
and my dog, like, so there were a bunch of things that I really just put to the side. And let me tell you why 50 was significant for me.
Mhm.
Because of the relationships that I described for you, for the women in my upbringing,
Mhm.
they got sick or died early. So my aunt, who was in an abusive relationship, got colon cancer at 49, had a stroke at 51, where she was totally incapacitated and
Wow.
eventually passed away from
Wow.
that stroke. My mother, in her early 40s, was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease.
Mm.
And it's like my mind said, and I said this in a flip way, but I meant it in all seriousness. I'm like, y'all ain't
Mhm.
about to kill me. Like,
Mm.
like I would look at my family and our dynamic, and let's just get this twisted. I mean,
Mhm.
don't get this twisted.
Mhm.
I have the most loving, caring, generous families that you ever would want to meet.
Mhm.
It is our patterns that
Mm.
are dysfunctional, not the
Yeah.
people. So I want to make sure that I give my family the respect that they deserve.
Mhm.
And I if I went there tomorrow, they would have their arms open and we were waiting for you. I mean, they're just that kind of people. They're just that loving. But the
Yeah.
patterns that we learned
Yeah.
are harmful. And what really confuses you about it is when you have loving people in your family who are dysfunctional. And
Mhm.
you're trying to reconcile, how do I stay in this relationship and still be healthy myself?
Mm.
That's not easy, and often it's not possible.
Right. Right. And so it's loving them from afar sometimes, which can be very, very painful. So, since you talked about this divorce, which was like a major issue, all that you had to go through in relation to that, but there were some other things happening around that time simultaneously, right? So, what were the other things?
So remember, I said I was going through menopause, right?
Mhm.
And eventually in that process, I had a hysterectomy. And so there was that loss. There was that grief and that loss from feeling like you're losing your womanhood and really
Mhm.
acknowledging that you won't ever have children again. And that was the one thing that you wanted when you got married. Like
Mhm.
the grieving of the life that you thought that you would have.
Mhm.
I guess, all the time, like you feel like there's some hope that you can turn some things around or things are not going to be this bad. And with
Mhm.
each step down the road, you realize I'm getting further and farther away, not closer together. And it's heartbreaking every step
Mhm.
along the way as you're getting to health and you're letting go of the dysfunction.
Mhm.
People think that I'm just cutting people off and I'm just going to have my peace and it's just an easy process. It absolutely is not. It is
Mhm.
heart wrenching and
Mhm.
painful, and you question yourself and you second guess. And the
Mhm.
more you read and engage in healthy stuff, you realize what you hadn't had was not healthy. But how do you disconnect from the people that you really care about? But at the same time, you're looking at the generations that come after you and you're saying, we can't do this anymore.
Mhm.
Those are a lot of feelings to manage when the world is in a lockdown on top,
Right.
right? And again, I was married to a man who was living in the house with me, but was gone. He was like coming in and out, and it was horrible. It was horrible.
Hmm. And you know what's interesting? You talked about, I appreciate you talking about how difficult the process is. It's heart-wrenching. And you talked about second guessing. So if people are watching this right now, and also for you, how did you address with those moments that you would second guess yourself? Like, am I doing the right thing? I don't know. I'm not
So
supposed to be doing this.
remember, I told you I cried every day for a year. And there was one person in my life, I call her my sister, neighbor, mother, friend.
Oh.
And literally, she allowed me to cry to her every single day. And she asked me before I got divorced a few things. The
Mhm.
first was, if nothing ever changes, will you be okay?
Mm.
And my answer was no. She
Mm.
asked me again. Now I'm saying a whole lot of women could take what you have and make it work and make something beautiful out of it. If nothing ever changes, will you be okay? My
Mhm.
answer was always no. I
Mm.
remember sitting with my ex-husband at the table one day and asking him, and we have a granddaughter, and I said, if she was married to someone like you, would you be okay?
Wow.
And he sat back in his chair and he said, mm. And I said, well, if it's not okay for her, why is it okay for me?
Mm.
And
You found your voice.
I was getting it,
Found
right?
your voice, yeah.
I was getting it, but I also knew that going through this divorce, I would not be supported. I would not be supported by my circle. I would not be supported by my family.
Hmm.
And it was almost like, you know, Mike's is a good guy. He's the
Hmm.
life of the party. You know, everybody loves him and all that. He was only abusive to me.
Hmm.
So I knew that was going to be a journey that I was going to have to go on alone. So not only was I finding my voice, but I
Mhm.
knew I was going to have to go alone. But thank God I didn't. So let's get back to, you said, how did you?
Well, you said that you did have some support. So you said you had therapy and you had your sister friend.
I had a sister, neighbor, mother, friend, and I joined two divorce support groups. So
Mm.
one was called Conquer with Leslie Vernon. And I will scream from the rooftops how much this woman has saved my life, because she taught about toxic and abusive relationships in standing your ground and setting boundaries from a biblical perspective.
Mm.
And one of the things that I struggled with so much was my faith, or what I was taught to believe about religion and behavior. And so
Mhm.
there was this religious crisis,
Mhm.
as well as this physical crisis with menopause, as well as this crisis in, you know, a marriage that's breaking up, as well as this crisis about having to set boundaries with my family and walk away, you know, go no contact for a while. So and so there were so many things happening, and then I'm like, I'm gonna lose my house, where am I gonna live? Like, all of these things are swirling around at the same
Mhm.
time. It was very difficult.
It sounds terrifying. And you also mentioned about a spiritual crisis. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. What, you know, me and God have been at war for a while, because, um, you know, many of us grew up in Baptist homes, and, you know, it was very authoritarian, and, you know, you kind of, you know, cow down to the deity or the higher authority, and your voice is really not as important as maybe other people, right?
Mhm.
So when I actually started reading the scripture and really trying to understand it for myself, there was a
Mhm.
painful unraveling that had to happen from
Mm.
what I thought to believe about God and love and religion. Like, I felt that I had to earn God's love. And I
Mm.
realize now that that's not the case. Now, I had to earn the love of my family
Mhm.
in a bunch of different cases, but
Mhm.
that's not God's way.
Right, right. So you had these supports, you interrogated some of the things you were reading to allow more reflection, but you also said that you knew you weren't going to get support from other people. So you sought support, like kind of like a chosen family. So you sought support outside of your family. And what about other friends? Were they supportive of you during this process?
You know, I really kind of had to step away from people who had a connection between the two of us.
Mm.
So I had my sister, neighbor, mother, friend, and honestly, she demonstrated a level of unconditional love that I will be grateful for forever forever because I'd never seen that demonstrated. And
Mm.
one is a business coach who's about 15 years older than me, but had experienced many of the same things, having gone through a
Mm.
painful divorce and, being a business owner and all of that. And she is an older white woman, but
Mhm.
her upbringing was very similar.
Mm.
And so I had my support group, my therapist, my sister, neighbor, mother, friend, my business coach, and another girlfriend who was also going through a divorce. And between
Mm.
that group, right, somebody was there offering some sort of support every single day.
Yeah, that's so important. So important. So you talked about these things happening. And how did you shift that mindset from, oh my God, my life is falling apart? You said, oh my God, where am I going to live? All these fears, these very realistic fears. How did that mindset shift from these terrible things that happened to me to these things need to happen for me to end up where I am? How did that happen? What was that process?
Everything I feared happened. It happened. It's very simple. The divorce happened. I had to move out of my house. My ex-husband basically stole the houses that were given to me for an entire year. I was homeless, essentially, living with my son for a year, a
Wow.
homeowner, not having access to properties that I own, and I work in real estate and I can't even defend myself. There's nothing I could do. I was at the mercy of the court system.
Wow. Is that why you had the 14 attorneys?
Absolutely, yes.
Wow. Was it like a forensic case or something?
There was all kinds of stuff going on.
Oh my
I mean,
God.
first of all, we were considered high net worth and
Mhm.
our, finances were kind of complicated.
Mhm.
But, my ex-husband just refused to participate in any part of the process.
Mm.
And being a realtor and having had a portfolio for real estate, I had to, go on the offense often to save my license and protect myself from getting into trouble and not breaking the law and following what the judge said, and judge could care less. And he just refused to participate in the
Wow, that sounds so stressful.
it was
So
throughout
stressful.
stressful. It
Oh
was.
my gosh. And so did things resolve in terms of your properties and did sort of resolve? Oh wow.
Eventually, yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Eventually.
Okay. So it was kind of like the worst thing happened. So
Oh,
the worst nightmares happened.
yeah.
And so it wasn't that you were fearing anymore. So now there's like, okay, the worst things have happened. And then you were saying, then how did that transform to this thing, these things needed to happen, and my life is really coming together? How did that, how you put
It really was a honestly, I would go back to Tisha. You left your mama's house at 18 with a 3-year-old and no car in the dead of winter. Like, if you can make it through that, you can make it through this. But really, the bigger thing for me is like, you're 53. How are you going to start over? You're walking away from everything, right? But
mm,
I'm going to give you an example.
mhm,
It was Labor Day weekend a year ago.
mhm.
And one of the properties that was awarded to me in the divorce, my ex husband chose not to give me because he said he didn't trust me.
What?
Uh, Even though the judge had ordered it, he just decided he was going to do it how he wanted to do it. Well, I went over to the house, and I would always go over there and check about once a week or so because I'm waiting for the judge to sign the divorce decree. And I still, got to kind of keep my eyes on him to make sure, nothing's going on. So
Mhm,
I go over there on a Saturday. It's Labor Day weekend, checking the
mhm.
house as I always do. Somebody was moving in it. I
Wow.
happened to pull in at the time the truck is unloading her stuff into my property.
What?
And I'm standing, now, mind you, I'm homeless. I've had to move out of our primary residence per the judge's orders. He said, you got to be gone in 30 days. I got my stuff. I got out. This is 16 years worth of stuff I got out of that house in 30 days.
Wow.
My stuff's going to storage. That particular house, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go over there. I'm going to fix it up, because we had been renting it to tenants. So it
Mhm,
wasn't, I wouldn't have lived in it the way that it was.
mhm,
But the handyman go over there, had it, all the estimates. I'm ready to go. I'm just waiting for the judge to sign so I can go ahead
mhm.
and move forward and I have possession of the property. Well, my ex-husband decided he was going to do things his way, as he always did. And he got an unlicensed property manager who rented the property out to
What?
I stood outside of the house and I said, you've been doing this for 18 years. You're a real estate agent. You have a real estate broker's license and you have a master's degree in real estate. You got a degree in criminal justice. You worked in parole. What are you getting ready to do?
Mm,
I had no idea who to call.
mm. Wow. What a slap in the face. Because you're actually seeing it happen.
I'm there. Oh, I didn't tell you. When the police finally came over and calls my ex-husband on the phone, he's on vacation. The property manager is gone someplace else. Nobody has a lease. I'm the only one with paperwork and the only person who cannot get into the house that I own.
So what ended up happening? That is insane. What happened?
I stood there and I said, Tisha, walk away. You're going to get your house eventually, and you're going to make more money telling this story than this house is worth.
Wow. That's
Walk
some
away.
wisdom. That must have been really hard. Really hard. But you did it.
I had to focus on my own healing. Like
Yeah.
that was
And
just,
your sanity, because that stuff is crazy making.
but that's what abusers do.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. So when all these things happen, right? And you said that I'm going to be able to use this experience to help other people. So in what ways do you feel like your life is coming together now? So it felt like it was falling apart. In what ways do you feel like it's coming together?
First of all, right now, I am a trainer, so I have the incredible job of teaching entrepreneurs how to build their business. And I get to every single day pour into about 300 agents on how to build their own life, right? And here's what I know to be true. I can say to them, and my therapist says this to me all the time. I'm like, why am I going through so much? She's like, hey, if you're going to be a coach, you kind of had to have gone through some stuff. So when you're sitting across from them, you can just go ahead and have the conversation
Mm-hmm.
and you're still standing. So at this point, I don't know why it is that I've gone through what I've gone through, but I know it's for something beautiful.
Ah, and you're starting to see that being revealed.
Absolutely, because where I am, the position that I have as trainer, the job found me. I've never ever been contacted by a headhunter ever.
Hmm.
I wasn't looking for anything. I knew I was ready to make a change, but I really
Mhm.
didn't know what that was going to look like.
Mhm.
And when they reached out, I was like, wow, this is really kind of what I wanted to be doing anyway. Because
Hmm.
during all this time, I was being creative. I was writing courses, I was writing books, I was writing. So I have all of those things, right?
Mhm.
Um, but it just gave me the opportunity to pour into other people and not focus on myself and to share, all of the mistakes that I made, in this process with real estate. It's like I have seen it from the rooter to the tutor, from residential to commercial to, as an investor, like I've seen it all. And
Mhm.
I've seen even being an educated person and trying to alert the court that if you don't do something, these things are going to happen, and it falling on deaf ears, and it all happened
Mhm.
anyway.
Wow. Wow. I agree, like as a coach, that going through life experiences, going through hardship and being able to rise above them, that makes us a more authentic coach or more authentic therapist. So as you're working, because you talked about the work you're doing now. So as you work, let's talk about your work with Black women. So as you work with Black women, and we're the same age. So as you work with Black women, let's say in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, what are some of the issues that they are presenting with, particularly those things that they're saying, oh my God, my life is falling apart? What are some of the issues that they're coming to you about?
So many things, right? I would say the biggest thing is that we don't have a safe space to be honest about how we're feeling,
Mm,
especially when we are the strong ones.
mm-hmm,
So in what I do, I work with a lot of executive real estate agents, and we're so used to being successful, and we're so used to running our business, and we're so used to being the ones that made it out, or as entrepreneurs, you're really working on trying to make it out of a situation that you were in. The
Mm-hmm.
challenge with that is that unless you're an entrepreneur, you can't really relate to the challenges that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And because oftentimes, as women, especially older women, women my age, we don't want to tell anybody we're struggling. So we're going to go ahead and put our lipstick on and put on our game face, and we're going to get back out of there. And I can look at them and know that their heart is breaking and that the weight is heavy. But I
Yeah.
just have to kind of fall back and make sure that allow them to come to me
Mm-hmm.
um, when they're ready, right? And so I'm building a level of trust, and quite frankly, the transparency that I'm able to share at this point is freeing because I grew up with so much shame. You don't talk about this, you don't talk about that, and you're not
Mm-hmm.
ashamed of yourself. I mean, these are just, and I don't even think that they were ever intended to
Mm-hmm.
cause the damage that they caused.
I think us as Black people, I think that's how many of us have been raised, and we've had to be that way, you know, out of enslavement. So we've had to mask so much. And so we unintentionally, I think, pass that on to our kids about don't let them see that they hurt you, don't let them, all these other things. But then that encourages a disconnect from how we really feel and no space for us to really express. That was messed up what happened to me. Or I'm very sad. And so feeling like we have to hold it in, like you're saying, you can see them and you could tell somebody's in pain, but they feel like they have to hold it. And the other part too is at the age that we are at, that particularly 40s, 50s, 60s, Black women have this perception of, well, I've been doing this all this time. I can't start over now. I'm in my 50s. I can't start over now. I have kids. I have this. I have that. I'm that close to retirement. I can't start over now. I just have to just stay here. I just have to just stick it out, right? But the thing is that the longer we try to stick it out, the more we're being harmed. And so, how do you work with Black women in your work who have that mindset of it's too late for me? I'm in my 40s, 50s, 60s. It's too late for me. I have to just stay with where I'm at.
It's funny that you say that because, as a divorcing military spouse, many, many, many of the military spouses came to me as their safe space, right? And so many of them were experiencing the same thing. But
Mm.
I can't go. The benefits are too good. I can't
Uh,
go. I should have left 10 years ago. I can't
mhm,
go. I can't go. And there is and I have a level of compassion for that because
mhm.
going for me was the hardest and it took out just about everything I had inside of me.
Yeah.
So
And you said it's a process. It took years.
it took years,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And I, I don't I don't know that I wouldn't wish there's some people that I'm not sure that this would be the route for them.
Hmm.
And not because they can't do it, but because they hadn't decided strong enough yet to
Mm,
do
mhm,
whatever is required to make it work,
mhm.
right?
And be okay with the worst case scenario happening and knowing that maybe the worst thing that happens has to happen for you to grow from it.
It did, and it's funny, as a real estate agent, I say, "Why am I going through this? What's happening?" And I sit back and I say, "Because you know what to do. You don't
Mm,
like it. It's not uncomfortable, but
yeah.
somebody else could have the same situation and not have the same tools that you have to make it work. Now, you don't want to do it. That doesn't
Mhm,
mean you can't. That doesn't mean you don't know who to call."
mhm,
So, one of the things that I have been very intentional about at
mhm,
this phase in my life is leverage and partnering with good people and
mm,
understanding my bandwidth. So, understanding things still need to get done, but
mhm.
I don't have to be the one to do everything. So who
Yes.
can I connect with, to partner with, so that we can make this a win-win and I can really focus on the most important things like me.
That is so important. Yes.
Yeah. So for me, it has been the way that I'm able to help women is to
Mhm.
just keep telling the story of the
Yeah.
foolishness that I have been through, and I'm still here. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
I don't wish I had gone through it again. But when
Mhm.
I tell you I feel fearless at this moment, I really do. I feel like
Yeah.
no matter what happens, I can figure it out. Everything about life is figure outable.
Yes. And I so appreciate you said that, because I really want Black women to know, like in the work that I do, that there's strength in us looking at what we've come from. So when you look at the worst things you've come through and you've been able to make it, so if you want to leave like a toxic job or a toxic relationship, if you were able to do that stuff, you can do that too. So having that sense of confidence, but you also talked about, which I appreciate, the importance of having good people around you, because our circle can either pour into us, or they can take away from us, or they can project all their fears onto us. So we have to use discernment about who do we want in our circle. So there might be people that we love or that we're close to, but maybe they shouldn't be in that circle that we're telling our inner thoughts or wants or things, because they're going to not support us. So use discernment with that. And, I think that's hard for us as Black people, because we, feel like this person's been in my life for so long. And can you speak to that?
Absolutely. I had to make an intentional choice to walk away from members of my family. And here's the reason why.
Mm-hmm.
In that space where it was the hardest, I knew I needed to be poured into.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that I needed to surround myself with people who had capacity. They were already living in a space where they had overflow. So
Yes.
they could pour from their overflow. I
Yes.
also knew that there was a group of people who always needed me to pour into them. It wasn't a space where I could be refilled. And
Mm-hmm.
knowing that to be true, I had to make the hardest decision ever was I'll loop back around to y'all after
Mm-hmm.
I get poured in over
I
here.
gotta save myself.
I'm being depleted at this very
Yes.
moment. And
Yes.
I know with some family members, I couldn't speak to them because I would have to take off you can't do it. You can't,
Mm-hmm.
like, I would have been sucked back into the space of doubt. And
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't have, like, the energy I had was so small. Just I only had like little mustard seeds, and I couldn't share a piece of that mustard seed with people who were on their own journey.
Yes.
I
Yes.
could only share my space with people who had gone through what I went through and was on the other side.
Yes. And I think for us as Black women to know that we're worthy enough, that we deserve it, and that us centering ourselves, and I say this a lot, us centering ourselves is not being selfish or self centered. We have to reject that. I think a lot of us have been brought up with you give, 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 give. You don't think about the people yourself. You're being selfish, all these things. But speaking to and doing things that benefit you and self preservation comes first. And so let us reject that notion that we're being selfish by doing that. And, I was thinking about something else too, because you said that some people you recognize are not able to go through this process for whatever reason. Um, but for the people who are, for the Black women who are, what are some of the things that you say to them in addition to sharing your powerful story, your powerful testimony? What are the other things that you say to them to help them start looking at what's happening to them as maybe it's necessary for them to pivot to something bigger and better? What do you say to them?
What I would say is there's a longing in our spirit always that says whether we're on the right track or not. And what
Mm-hmm.
I can say is in my marriage, there was always a disruption there that kept
Mm-hmm.
saying, this is not safe. This is not
Mm-hmm.
the best place for you. Right.
Wow. So
And
you felt that, you heard that voice, you felt that.
I felt it was off. I didn't
Wow.
know how to fix it, but I felt it was off. And the
Mm-hmm.
way that I would ask my question to myself is what you're pouring your energy into right now getting you to the life that you want to have?
Mm.
And I knew that I wanted a life of wealth, a
Mhm.
life of peace, a
Mhm.
life of travel, a life of intellectual stimulation, a life where I laughed, a life where I felt safe, and
Yeah.
not just in the strong parts of me, but
Yeah.
the vulnerable parts of me. And it wasn't until I met my sister, neighbor, mother friend that I could share those vulnerable parts, and she never, ever, ever judged me. Now, she
Mm.
would lovingly correct me, not always in the
That's
moment,
a good friend.
right? Not always in the moment that I shared, but she
Mhm.
would always loop back and she would
Mhm.
say things early on that I couldn't grasp at the time she said them. But again,
Mhm.
remember, I'd plant them and come back and I'd read
Mhm.
a Bible passage or I'd hear it a different way. And I was like, that's what she meant. That she told me that it hurt my feelings so, so bad.
Mhm.
And she was like, y'all wasn't in a relationship. I was like, what do you mean? We're married. We was in a and she was like, I'm sorry, I hate to hurt your feelings, but y'all weren't in a relationship.
Wow.
I couldn't
Ooh.
grasp it at the time.
Repeat that to the people in the back. Sometimes you could be in a relationship, but it's not really a relationship.
It's not a relationship. It
Mm,
it might be a trauma bond. It
mm.
might be you just settled in, but a relationship,
Or as the younger generation says, it might be a situationship,
a
right? It
situation.
may not be a relationship.
Child, we were not in a relationship.
Wow.
And it took me a moment to understand I was like, what you talk about? We married. Like, that's not a relationship, right? That was a legal bond. See, a
Yeah.
relationship requires you to be mindful of how your behavior impacts the person that's with you. A
Mm,
relationship requires for you to be as concerned about your partner's needs as your own. A
mhm.
relationship is where someone's getting to know you for you, not what they need from you. A
Yeah.
relationship is when things get hard, you stick in it. The relationship is we got this relationship. I don't care about this stuff. If we already got the stuff, we can get more stuff. I just want to make sure you good. If
Mhm.
that's not what you have, you're not in a relationship.
So true. So
That's
true.
what
At the
I have.
base level, if you don't experience that sense of not only physical safety, but psychological safety, emotional safety, that you can lean into your partner and be uplifted when you need to. And your partner is there, hopefully, there to support you when things are not going right. They want to hear, like, what's not going right? How do we work together to fix it? And so your sister friend was speaking truth to you and you didn't want to hear it. So
No,
you
it's
got
not that.
defensive.
It's not that I didn't get defensive. It hurt my feelings because
Oh, hurt
I
your
knew
feelings.
what she was always telling me was from a place of love. Now, I wasn't
Ah,
really willing to accept it at that moment, but she's never steered me wrong. So
yeah.
even though she would say it long before I could grasp what she meant, she always lovingly told me the truth.
And that's a wonderful thing. Again, that's an example of a good friend. A good friend is not always like a yes person. A good friend is not definitely not somebody who tears you down or projects stuff. A good person can listen to you and they use discernment about when are you able to hear what I need to tell you? When are you able to hear the truth? And I'm going to tell it to you, even if it hurts your feelings, because I love you enough to say that. Right? Okay.
And I would cry, like I would cry, like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm just dumping all of this on you." And she's like, "Girl, no. As soon as I leave from you, I'm going to give it to God." And she always let me know, like, no matter what it was for me, one, she had been through it, right? She'd
Uh-huh.
been through it, and she said, "I
Uh-huh.
hated my ex-husband, like
Ooh.
hated him." And
Ooh.
she was real about that, right? And she said it took me a long time to get over it, right? And because she was coming from a place of experience
Mm-hmm.
and love, and the value system of her life was in alignment of what I wanted mine to look like, I
Mm.
could hear from her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's an example. And I know I keep quoting Glamazini, and I think I told you this quote from Glamazini, who said, "Check the tree before you pick the fruit." So
Oh,
if you are confiding in people and they're not living the life that you want, why are you seeking guidance from them? But your friend is living the life that you want. So you're like, okay, I can listen to that. So we need to again use that discernment. It's so important. So not that long ago, I heard Iyanla Vanzant make a quote, and she was talking about her life and how her life, things were happening, and her life was falling apart. And she was saying that it felt like her world was crashing in, her world was falling apart. And she said she was cracked wide open, and she needed to be cracked wide open so that she could realize the broader potential, and she had more clarity, and she was able to pivot into that direction. And I would definitely say that that has happened to me.
hmm.
And I call that, or people refer to this, and I definitely know that I've gone through this. It's post-traumatic growth. So
Oh,
you've gone through something traumatic and you grow from that experience. So I would unequivocally say Me going through that toxic job experience, I experienced post-traumatic growth because now I am doing something I never would have done before. I never would have had a YouTube channel. I never would have been talking about, Black women in toxic jobs. I never would have been, really focused on ways to support Black women in toxic jobs and sharing resources. That would not have happened, right? So I found my voice in a different way. It's kind of like they woke up a sleeping lion, right? I was asleep. I was like, oh, I'm trying to like go along and be along. I was like, I was dying inside. I was miserable. But that trauma needed to happen. It needed to happen for me to be doing the work that I'm doing. So for you, it sounds like exactly what you're talking about is post-traumatic growth. So how do you speak to that with the Black women that you work with?
I think, okay, so first of all, I think about, for me, I can't speak for many people, but I have a couple things that whenever a decision needs to be made, I filter it through. And it
Okay.
is, and I say this, I don't mean to qualify this in a particular way, but this is just my saying.
Mm-hmm.
I say to myself, when you're 70 years old and you look back on this decision, will you wish you had or be, no, will you, yes, will you wish you had or be glad you did?
Oh, I like that question.
And so whenever I'm like on a crossroads on what decision to make, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I did that a lot with my ex-husband. And I
Mm-hmm.
finally got to the point where, you know what? I can advocate for myself. If he decides he wants to come back around and he wants to work on a relationship, he can come back later, right? But that was the point where I finally freed myself to say, I gotta move on to this particular spot. But as far as being crack wide open, I was
Mm-hmm.
comfortable. I had a
Mm-hmm.
very, very comfortable life. I didn't have to
Mm-hmm.
work. I can get up when I felt like it. I could walk around when I felt like I wanted to walk around. And
Mm-hmm.
but at that same time, I was making minimal impact in anybody else's life.
Yeah, well, when you say comfortable, you were comfortable in a sense, but you were internally not comfortable. And so it was trying to like, I think maybe trying to convince yourself, like, what's wrong with me? I should be happy with this. But internally, that little girl was saying, Tisha, no, we're not happy. Tisha, this is not okay. And so all these things, like you said, had to happen. And so you support that in Black women that you work with. I support that with Black women I work with. So if there's a Black woman watching right now, Tisha, and she has gone through something similar, or she is feeling at this moment, there are things happening in her life that her life is falling apart. It just feels like it's just overwhelming. Her life is falling apart. What words of wisdom could you offer to her?
Decide. Decide. As a woman, you get to decide what you're going through means to you.
Mm,
For me, I wanted it to mean to my granddaughter that you will never be dependent on a man ever.
mm,
You will
mhm,
never have to pay another student loan ever.
mm,
I will help you set up your life in such a way that you don't have to be bound to anybody agreeing with the decision that you make that's good for you.
mm,
My why was big. So you get to decide, what does this cracking open mean? Does it mean that I give up and I quit and I'm going to look in the past for what used to be? Or
mhm,
does it mean that I'm going to open myself up to the experience that God would have for me and
mhm,
being able to impact lives along the way? There's no reason for us to have gone through the trauma and the pain that we've gone through without being a beacon of hope and light for someone on the other side. What
so
is
true.
the point of it? I
So
have
true.
lived. Here's the craziness, right? As I was going through this crazy 4-year divorce, I
Mhm,
traveled to Africa and Italy and Spain and Portugal and Dubai. Like I lived a magnificent life and going through the greatest hell ever.
mm.
It wasn't all bad.
Right, right. So allowing the process to happen, and as you're going through the process, seeking out those resources that can help you. Therapy, coaching, community, good, good, honest people who are there to support you.
And YouTube and books and podcasts. I mean,
All those resources.
literally, I was pouring. I probably read about 100 books in going through the process.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow. Wow.
And
So
that's how I can put language to what I've gone through.
exactly. And that's what's so powerful when we not only provide testimonial about what we're going through, but when we start reading and researching, we will have a name to it. So like the whole pet's a threat. I didn't know what that was before, but I experienced it.
Right.
So again, everybody, if you're not familiar with pet's a threat, I always have to explain what pet's a threat is and give the 3 Black women researchers their credit because people steal their work. Okay. So I got to say their names. I got to tell you briefly what it is. So pet's a threat, created by 3 Black women researchers, Dr. Juanita Johnson-Bailey, Dr. Keisha Thomas, Dr. Rosemary Phelps. Pet the Threat deals with when a Black woman comes in the workplace and she is sought out because of her outstanding work abilities. And she is doing it. She comes in and she's doing it, right? Tisha's so smart. We love her. Oh my God. She has just transformed this whole work environment. And then Tisha, or you, starts outshining in the workplace. You're outshining other people. And there's a shift. So before you were the pet, there's a shift in terms of how you're treated as the threat. And they will try to push you out or make things so uncomfortable for you. So again, that experience happened to me, but I didn't have a word for it. I didn't know what to call it. But now I'm able to talk to Black women to give a word to what the experience is. And that is so liberating to be able to say, I'm not crazy. Or wait a minute, I'm not the only one going through this. Like this, there's a name to this. It's so healing. So Tisha, as we're winding down, I'm going to read the community chat because I know it's been very active. So as we're winding down, can you please share with the audience about your work, your services, your book, your YouTube channel? Share all that information with the audience, and I'm going to put your book information on the screen.
Fantastic. So, okay, I'm just so excited, thrilled. Actually, I have a book release coming soon, and I'm going to pull up the information for you so that you have
I have it. I have it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm gonna post it, and I'll put it in the description section too. But it's up on the screen.
It's Emergence: Rediscovering Your Purpose After Divorce. It's just been just an incredible experience. I've also written another book. It's not released yet, but it's phenomenal as well. I am a speaker, author, trainer, coach. There is a free download for you if you'd like to go to my website, Train with Tisha, or Transform with Tisha. There's a free download for you on making over your midlife. You can find me on YouTube at Midlife Makeover Movement. You can find me on IG, the Midlife Makeover Maven. And of course, I have a Facebook group, the Midlife Makeover Movement. It's a private group. It's only for ladies. I'm also a real estate agent in Georgia. So I'm actively investing in selling real estate, as well as teaching another 300 agents how to do it at the largest owned African-American real estate company, luxury real estate company in the country. We have offices in Atlanta, Alabama, and Texas, and we're looking to move to California. So we're right at a space where I am not only helping African Americans change the lives of generations, but their own lives. And many, many, many of the folks that I coach are also in toxic jobs. So it's so exciting for me to be able to say, if you're ready to leave, you put this, and this in place, and I'm going to hold your hand while you do it.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So everybody, I put just information on the screen, but I will also, I see Marissa. Hey, Marissa. I will also put all the information in the description section. Okay. So I'm going to read the community chat. Like I said, it was very active. So good evening, sisters. Peace to you all. Hello. Hey, Marissa. Hey, Giovanna. Hello, everyone. A lot of highs. Oh, hey, Black Boomer Besties from Brooklyn. Hey. Wow, that's deep. Sounds like my story. That's a word, been there. That's the experience of so many of us. We saw what we don't want, but we didn't have models for a better way. Yes. And so for me, and I think for you, Tisha, is that we have been able to see things that we haven't liked and say, okay, this time I'm going to create something different based upon what I know I don't want to be like. Okay. So for me, I even think about when I experienced in the toxic workplace of the workplace bully. And I said, I would never want to be a leader like that. And so when I've been in leadership positions, I am the opposite of what I have experienced. Yes. You are talking to me, sis. Yes, can relate to your story. Thank you, Tisha, for sharing this in the safe space. Thank you, Dr. Kammani, for creating a safe space. Thank you. Thank you for watching. This is such an important conversation. Thank you for the space to have it. Everybody, before I forget, give this video a thumbs up, okay? So I see all these affirmations in the chat, but also give this video a thumbs up, okay? Because then YouTube will suggest this video to other Black women. And I am ushering in a movement to help as many Black women as I can to leave toxic jobs, okay? So that is one thing that I want to do. But the other thing that I want to do is to really support healing for Black women in general, if you're in a toxic job or not. So please, again, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, subscribe to Tisha's channel, and share this video with at least 2 other Black women. Let me see. This is such an important conversation. Thank you. So true. You don't even realize that you're experiencing what you're experiencing is dysfunctional. Yes, cognitive dissonance, codependence, cognitive dissonance, ancestral patterns, all of this. Thank Tisha, you did the work. Tisha is blowing me away. So insightful. Yes, she is. Scapegoat child. OMG, you're speaking about my life right now. Thank you. Tisha, this is deep. I feel you, sis. This is so real. Epigenetics, weathering, social determinants of health are all things Black women must take into consideration as we heal. Yes. And let me just speak to epigenetics. I train on that too. So epigenetics deals with, it's a field within genetics, and it talks about when a parent has gone through some type of stress or trauma, it can change the way that parent's DNA is read and transcribed. So the child may not have gone through the same trauma, but they may have a similar trauma reaction. So yes, we need to be very mindful of ways that our social conditions are impacting us, not only like the here and now, but like biologically. We could pass it on to our kids. And then weathering deals with when you're experiencing stressful events, like chronic stressful events, like a toxic job or racism, sexism that all of us experience, then that can cause your organs to age at a faster rate. So I've done videos on that with Black medical doctors, and also social terms of health, thinking about what do we have access to in our communities. And even this, even when we do have access to quality services, sometimes we still experience racism, even though we may go to a prestige hospital or we may go to an esteemed institution. We still may experience racism. So those issues may impact our physical and mental health. So good point. Let's see. Good evening, everyone. You realize that what you had wasn't healthy can apply to relationships, friendships, jobs, and family. Absolutely. Absolutely. So true. Good evening. There's a dysfunctional and then there's destructive family. Ooh, yes. We have to understand that if our spirit is being terrorized by those who should love you, family, that is not God's destiny for us. Yes. And I think that's so painful to come to that realization. And that's why therapy is sometimes needed to really grieve the loss of the family that you wish you had, just like it might be a relationship or a job. That grieving process needs to happen. It really takes an exercise of that faith muscle to move forward in life's challenges. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Hello, good. I'm going through this right now. Wow, wow, wow. From Dr. Leslie. Oh, wow. That's bold as hell. I think when the person was moving into your house,
Oh,
that was crazy. Speak the truth, Tisha. Hey, I would definitely need to listen to the replay. Good. Yes, please listen to it and please share with other Black women too. Thank you for sharing this with us. You're welcome. Yes, I appreciate your candor. Tisha, you are awesome. Thanks for sharing your story. I agree. Paying it forward. Thanks for your transparency. Tisha, thank you. Shame goes away with fresh air. Marissa, that was dope. Shame goes away with fresh air. Yes, 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 yes. So part of the shame is that something bad has happened to us and then we feel shame. But when you speak out about things, then the shame no longer has a chokehold on you. So when I was at that toxic job and they were doing so many things to humiliate me, and it was shameful, but I said, wait a minute, I didn't do anything wrong. Why am I feeling shameful? So I'm going to create a YouTube channel and talk about it. So the more I talked about my experience, the more air, and I was able to help liberate other Black women. So thank you, Marissa. That is a beautiful quote. As sick as our secrets, yes, we know secrets, okay? I love what you're saying, Marissa. Yes, We can be examples for younger women before they have negative experiences. We can model healthy lifestyles. We should definitely be who we want to be. I completely agree with that too. Um, a woman said, I'm 70 with 9 granddaughters. I openly share my journey with them. So important because I think a lot of times our ancestors don't really, the older generation don't really share things with us. And it really helps to humanize them, but also we can learn from their experiences. It's never too late to gain your peace of mind and to love yourself while developing self-compassion. Yes, yes, yes. Left it all at 58 and started over, afraid. Yes, but enough was enough.
I love it.
Yes. Okay. It's never too late. As long as you have another day to live, it's never too late. Never too late. Amen. Bless your heart. You are a treasure. I saw this quote recently. Don't don't be afraid of starting over. This time you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. I agree. Yes. Sometimes we have to divorce toxic jobs, family situations, and friends. Yes, we do. Living that right now, suck back into the space of doubt, suck back into small spaces. It's a note for us. It's a note for us. No, yes, a note for us. God brings you to places to shine, not to be small. Yes. Put your safety mask on first. I had been in a 30-year, not a relationship. Ooh. Yikes.
Oh no, yeah.
Ooh. Say
Ooh.
that you are not in a relationship. Wow. Thank you, Tisha. Dr. Kammani, you consistently have wonderful programming, always insightful, leading to the healing journey. Ashe. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Again, this is a reflection of my own post-traumatic growth. So
Mhm.
if I was not in a situation where it felt like my world was falling apart, and I'm gonna do a longer video about this probably in October, where I am going to be a little bit more vulnerable about what I was going through when I was at the toxic job. So it wasn't only the toxic job that was happening. I was going through the worst time in my life. There was something happening in my life with one of my sons at the same time that I was going through this. And I really felt like my world was falling apart.
Yep.
But part of my healing was to speak up about it, like again, about the toxic job, with the situation that my son was going through. We ended up suing a school. So all those things, I'll be talking about that a lot more in October when I talk about Anti-Bullying Prevention Month. But yes, I will continue to talk about it too, because so many of us are going through these things. Where God, give it to God. Yes. Good for you. Where God guides, He provides. Coming in late will be in team replay. Good to catch the missed conversation. Continue to repeat her 2-part question regarding making her decision.
Uh, so it is when you're 70 and looking back, will you wish you had or be glad you did? And that really started when I was getting my master's degree and I was in my 40s. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm too late to be going back. And I was like, when you're 70, will this year really matter to you? And when you're looking back, will you wish that you sacrificed this year or will you be regretting that you did not?
Exactly. And it's important to ask that to yourself and be mindful when certain people might try to not try to get you to not do things because of the age thing. So I remember when I was much, much, much younger, when I was going to graduate school, and this woman, but I knew she was shady. I could just tell her tone. And so she said, because I was working like a part-time job in a residential treatment center. And I said, well, I can't work that many hours. She said, you should work full time. And I said, no, because I'm going back to graduate school. And she said, so what are you going for? I said, well, I'm getting my PhD in clinical psychology. And it's a woman who did not look like us. And she said, oh, that's a very lofty goal, right? That's a very lofty goal. And so I was like, oh, she's hating on me, right?
Mhm.
She's hating on me. She's trying to act like, oh, 5 years, that's a long time. But God willing, we're all going to live. So what, whatever. But you have to use that discernment, because some people might have said, what does she mean by that? Oh my God, that is a long time. I was like, no, I wish I could go back and show her where I am now, but whatever. I digress. Okay. Oh, that's a good quote. Check the tree before you pick the fruit. I got it to Glamazini that she said that. Black women tend not to understand the ways that patriarchy, including patriarchal religions, impact us. Yes, yes, yes. So true. Okay. The conversation is so full of good saying. Good. Beautiful. You guys rock. Thank you. I love this transformation. will will you wish you had, oh right, that's right, that's the quote, right? So will you wish you had or be glad you did? Yes, thank you for putting that up there, Marissa. Working on leaving a toxic job environment. I have no one to talk to. I just listen to your videos and make an exit strategy. Okay, sis. um, I'm happy that these videos can be of support to you. And that's what I say to all Black women is, if you're starting to think about leaving a toxic job, my videos might be helpful for you. So you see my experiences, you see other Black women who've gone through the experience and we're doing well. But also, I want to provide you resources because I don't want you to feel like you're just out there. I also want to support you in looking at other resources too, like therapy, coaching, other resources that are available, because you're going to need that. You're going to need that. So, Tish, this is another question I didn't plan to ask you, but I got to ask you anyway. Do you have any regrets about these changes you made in your life?
Absolutely. Honestly, and this is not for my marriage, like for the sake of the marriage. I
Mhm.
wish that I had been healthier emotionally. And I think that there's some things that maybe I would have handled differently.
Mhm.
And not necessarily for the sake of the marriage itself, but for my
Mhm.
own, personal peace of mind.
Mhm.
I hate or really dislike that the trauma really had to come to a head before I really
Mhm.
could deal with it.
Yeah.
Up until that point, I really thought I could manage it, or you really don't even know what's even rising to the surface. So I think that I don't regret the time that I've taken. And you can't go back and look, about a series of things, but I wish that I had been a little healthier along the way.
Mhm.
I wish I had tackled the codependence journey, and I wish I had, tackled the dysfunction a little bit earlier. And
Mhm.
so instead of dealing with it, I would, eat. And, there was a book I read called Counterfeit Comforts. And it
Mhm.
really was about turning to things. For me, it was
Mhm.
food or achieving, or there were addictions along the way.
Mhm.
Alcohol got to be a problem during COVID for me, that
Mhm.
I wish that I had had the skill set that I have now then,
Mhm.
but I
Yeah.
didn't. And sometimes I wonder, and I have to be very mindful of this, right? That I don't control everything, but I wonder if things maybe would have gotten as bad had I been healthier.
Yeah, you know what? I just a parallel in terms of what I experienced at a toxic job was things were getting bad for a number of years. And I had really good people around me, my family, my close friends telling me, girl, you got to go. My therapist, girl, you got to go. This is getting really bad. And I was just determined because I wasn't going to let them run me out this good job with these good benefits. And I was a Harriet Tubman for the Black students in the school district. And I wasn't going to go. So even though these things were happening, I still stayed, but it had to get so bad that it was no way for me to stay. And my Black woman therapist said to me that these things needed to happen for me to go because I was on a rescue mission. So God was rescuing me from a toxic situation, but I didn't recognize it at the time because I was caught up, right? So
Yep.
my unhealed spaces allowed me to stay there longer. And I think part of for me, and I don't know for you, part of for me now is I have to practice self-forgiveness because I was in a wounded place when I was there and why I stayed there, and I was harmed more the longer I stayed. But I have to practice self-forgiveness because when I think back to where I was then, I couldn't have made those decisions, right? Those things had to happen to me. And so practicing self-forgiveness is so important because I don't want to beat myself up about what I should have done or whatever, right? And then something else, and we're really going to wind down, everybody, but something else I heard one of my coaches say, Rachel Rogers, she said, and she was quoting somebody else. I don't know who she quoted, but she said that first God sends you a message through a whisper, like a
Yep.
feather, right? And then you don't listen, just like me. All those things I was having at the toxic job, getting sick, gaining weight, hair falling out, nosebleeds. Still I stayed. Still I stayed. Getting sad, getting all that kind of stuff. Still I stayed, right? But then that brick comes and knocks you down. And when you get up, the hope is that you rise higher, right? So again, that post-traumatic growth. So Tisha, I'm going to give you the last word and then we're going to wind down.
I think that it took really God to humble me in a number of ways, right? In some ways, I made my marriage and my ex-husband my God.
Mm,
I made myself, my education, and my abilities my God. I
mm,
needed the humility, having had a son as a teenager, and his father was murdered when I was 17, and
wow.
I kind of raised him on my own. He was the one in my family didn't go to jail and wasn't on drugs and didn't have baby mamas, and he's married and his is thriving, him and his children.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so um I, I through my pride believe that I'd done that on my own, and this humbled me to realize that I was able to do those things by the grace of God.
Yes.
Once you get to a space where you've done everything you can do and
Mhm.
everything is out of your control and it still falls apart, you
Yeah,
really realize, for me, I realized I really wasn't controlling anything. This was God's ordination all along. But
yeah,
I was so busy trying to hold on to my will, me
yeah,
believing I could make my marriage work by myself. I
yeah.
could do all this stuff by myself because I'm used to being successful and putting my head down and making things work. And when you're in a space where there's nothing that you can do that makes the situation better,
Yeah,
everything that you were afraid that was going to happen has happened, and
yes,
you feel down in the dumps, but then you wake up every day and you're still here. And
yes,
the next day you're still here. And
yes.
the next day you're still here. And instead of crying all day, I'm only crying for, 4 hours. And then I'm only crying for an hour. And then I'm
Mhm,
only crying for 15 minutes. And then
mhm,
I'm only crying every other day. But you
mhm.
still making a step after step after step. And all of a sudden you look back and you say, oh my God, you are amazing. I have no idea how I survived that.
Yes. Oh my God, that was like a whole sermon. And I know I said I was going to stop, but I have to say something in response to what you just said, because that was so on point. And, for me, I think it was having the faith that even though I didn't know what was coming after, having the faith to know that God wanted something better for me. God did not want me to suffer in a situation where I was being harmed. And that again, even though I couldn't see it, I knew there had to be something better for me. And being obedient to that, being obedient and not knowing what's coming next. But when we hear, the higher power of God, when we hear that we listen. And so I shared the story that, all these things were happening at the toxic job, and I took a leave of absence. I did all these other things. But when I heard the voice of God when I was in the shower say to me, if you go back to that job, it's a death sentence, that is what got me to resign. I listened, I was obedient. So my hope is that as we're listening to what we're talking about now and Black women, as you sit and you pause and you hear what is being said to you deep within, you pay attention to intuition, you pay attention to higher power, you will be led. You will be led. You need to be quiet. You need to pause and listen and start making your exit plan. Okay. So, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in today. So, as I said before, give this video a thumbs up so other Black women can see this, and share this video with at least 2 other Black women. I will put all of Tisha's information in the description section. So, check out everything she's got, support everything she's doing. So, subscribe to my channel, subscribe to her channel, and I will see you next time. See you later, everybody. Bye-bye.